I think I have a picture there. So this is how it goes. You preheat the oven, get out the utensils and ingredients, remove the blocks and toys from the table, you grease the pan, you crack the nuts, you measure 2 cups of flour, then you remove the baby's hands from the flour, then you wash the flour off the baby, and then you remeasure the flour. Then you put the flour, the baking powder, and the salt in the sifter. Then get the dustpan and brush up pieces of the bowl the baby knocked on the floor. Then you get in another bowl, and then you answer the doorbell. Then you return to the kitchen, remove the baby's hands from the bowl, and wash the baby again. Then you answer the phone. Then you get distracted while you're talking on the phone for half a second. And then you remove 1/4 inch of salt from the grease pan, look for the baby, grease another pan, answer the phone again, find the baby again, clean up the ingredients on the floor, remove the baby's hands from the bowl again, pick up the greased pan and find a layer of nutshells in it, head for the baby who flees, knocking the bowl off the table, wash the kitchen floor, table, walls, and dishes. Call the bakery. Put the baby down for a nap and lie down. Some of you know that kind of stress. Well, we're going to talk about stress today. Now, having described a stressful situation, let me begin by saying that not all stress is actually bad stress. Sometimes stress can actually be a very helpful thing. And stress is actually the normal reaction of your body when you are facing a crisis. And that's a very good thing. It causes us to actually function a little quicker. Our heartbeat goes up, our heart rate goes up, our breathing gets a little bit shallower and quicker, our adrenaline starts flowing through our veins, we have a burst of energy, and we are able to face the situation with a sense of eagerness. Now, there's a few other things that also happen. Your stomach starts to slow down. Your frontal lobe of your brain actually starts to slow down as well, which is where the logic is. So you are not quite as good at solving intricate logical issues, questions like difficult math issues, and so on and so forth. And there's other hormones that kick into your body. Basically, your body begins to function more in a fight or flight mode than in a normal resting mode. Now that's a good thing. God created our bodies to be able to do that in crisis situations. However, our bodies were also meant to come out of the crisis and go back to a normal, what physicians call homeostasis, where our bodies are functioning normally. Our heart rate is at a normal pace. Our breathing is normal. The adrenaline should dissipate. Our stomachs should go back to digesting the food. Our brains should begin to function normally again. And we should be able to function in a situation where we have occasional crisis situations and our stress level goes up, and then we go back to non-stressful situations. Stress becomes a real problem when it goes on for too long or happens too often to us. The worst thing for us is chronic stress, where we're trying to function at that elevated level of hormones and alertness continuously. That's when it begins to do some serious damage. And actually, what happens is that it starts to wear out your organs. Your organs are not created to function under heightened levels of stress continuously. And so you actually will begin to wear some of them out, depending on where in your particular body the weakest link is, or the weakest organs. And interestingly enough, even if you live to be a very ripe old age, you likely will not die of old age. You will likely actually die of one or two of your organs wearing out. And when they wear out, then the system starts to fall apart, and then you die. And so we actually are speeding up our demise physically when we live under chronic stress all the time, which is not good at all. And there's medicine has created ways to artificially sustain our life, basically compensate for the wearing out of certain organs. But that's not really the way you ultimately want to have a quality of life. The best thing is to live the way God intended us to live, which is to have occasional times of stress and then other times of rejuvenation or relaxation. So God created us to have a rhythm that is up with stress, but then down again. However, our culture really works against this. Our culture reinforces this idea that living at a higher level of stress or capacity or under pressure, if you will, is actually an admirable or desirable way to live. And so busyness becomes this thing that we take pride in. How many of you have asked somebody, "How are you doing?" And their answer is, "Oh, I'm busy." Yeah, it happens all the time. People are living in this sense of angst about busyness. Yeah, I forgot about this. I had a little diagram here. So this is how stress is intended to function, that we go up and then we go down. But when we extend our stress over time, you see there that you end up getting into fatigue, exhaustion, and then panic, anxiety, and anger begin to set in, and then burnout and breakdown, and sicknesses and diseases can actually result from that as well when we extend our stress level too long. But we are pushing ourselves in our culture here in the West to be at that heightened level of performance all the time, and this wreaks havoc on our system over time. Now, when you're young, you can get away with it, or you think you can get away with it, but as you get older, you start paying the price for that. And unfortunately, often by then, a lot of the damage has been done. Although, even starting to live a better balanced rhythm, even at an older age, can really, really help you. And our culture really exalts this idea of pushing yourself, of going hard, of really, living at a fast pace, because we somehow believe that we are important when we have to live like that. We believe that, we've got places to be, stuff to do, people to see, all of these things, so we go. And when you meet somebody and you say, "How are you doing? How's life treating you?" And they say, "Oh yeah, it's just kind of moseying along, just sort of taking things as they come." Our culture doesn't really look at that and go, "Wow, you're such a great person." We look at that and go, that's different. We don't necessarily naturally brag about that. But here's an interesting thing. We as a culture, want to live at that elevated level of performance, but it's actually not the amount of things that we're trying to do that causes the stress. What causes the stress is actually the fear of dropping the ball, or one of the balls that we are trying to keep in the air. It's the fear of messing up something important. And when we've got too many things going at the same time, all of which are important, our stress level goes up because our fear of messing up goes up. And so we live in this constant tension of, am I going to get this right? Am I going to be able to keep all of this stuff going? If we were to be able to relax and go, you know what, if I drop a few balls, no big deal, our stress level would come down, but we would still be able to do all of those different things. Now you just think about this for a minute. If it was the pace at which we were living our lives that was the real problem, then running, like as in, exercising on the treadmill or running around the track, would be the most stressful thing you could do. Because that's when we are moving at our highest capacity. We are doing the most things with our physical body. And yet it turns out that actually running lowers our stress level. So it's not the amount of things we're doing, actually, it's the fear of messing up the amount of things we're doing that causes us to feel stress. It's the fear of the disaster that would happen if we messed up. And that is something I have struggled a lot with in my life. That anxiety over messing up. And I can feel my stress levels going up when I have more things going on because I'm more afraid of messing up. One of the most common things that God says in the Bible is two words: fear not. Somebody said that there's 365 different places where God says, don't be afraid. One for every day of the year. That includes the fear of dropping balls. The fear of messing up, stress, if you will. And when we get stressed, it actually reveals something about ourselves. It reveals where we have attached our identity to. So, for example, when I get stressed out over dropping the ball of one of the many balls that I'm trying to keep in the air, it reveals that my stress or my identity is linked to my performance. If I see myself as failing at performing well in one of these many different areas, that would be disaster. Because my identity would be reflected in that. In my mind, I would be saying, you are not a good person. And so my stress level is way up high as a result of that. And bottom line is, I feel good when I'm productive. I feel good when I can see that I've done something well. And so my identity is tied up in that, and thus my stress level goes up. And our society reinforces this. Just think about it. What is your paycheck for? Productivity. What is your pay raise for? Doing a good job. And there's all kinds of other awards that you get for productivity and affirmations. And it goes down to, and this is something if you study leadership, they say that leadership in a corporate sense has more to do with subtle reinforcements than with paychecks and pay raises. Because that, it's easy to throw money at people, and we appreciate money, but there's something even more powerful, and that's the way you look at people. People pick up on the subtle body language of reinforcement, and you will automatically reinforce the things that your identity is tied to. So if your identity is tied to productivity, the way you look at somebody when they are being productive will reinforce that. And this, I believe, is probably one of the most powerful forces in our culture. The way that we communicate non-verbally with each other continuously reinforces this identity in productivity and thus drives our stress levels up. Bottom line is, we leak what we value. Whether we are aware of it or not, it just leaks out in all kinds of ways, and that reinforces it in each other. And it's not just in our jobs. It's in all of the areas of our performance. It's in how well we parent. It's in how well we have our friendships functioning. It's how well our marriages work. It's how well our relationships are doing. It's how good of a job we're doing of exercising. And so on and so on and so forth. How well we maintain our health and our mental health and so on and so forth. All of these things are part of the performance mentality of our culture that drives our stress levels up. Am I doing a good job? Whoa, if I drop the ball here, that would be disaster. And so we live under this pressure that we put on ourselves. And God says, I want you to do well in life, but I don't want you to have to stress yourselves out about that. So I want you to succeed, but not necessarily succeed in the way the culture defines success. I want you to succeed on the inside. See, God said to Samuel, man looks at the outward, and we tend to define success by outward criteria, but God looks at the heart. He wants you to succeed on the inside. He wants you to have a thriving inner world where you feel good, where you feel that sense of affirmation on the inside, where there's peace, there's calm, there's joy, there's love, there's affirmation. And so Jesus actually came to make that possible for us. That's why Jesus said, I bring you peace. Not like the world does. I give you a peace that cannot be taken away from you. It's a beautiful thing. So I want to look at a little passage together. This is in 1 Timothy chapter 6. So the books of Timothy, they're towards the end of your Bible. And they're actually written by Paul, and he was an older preacher who was mentoring a younger preacher, Timothy. And this is what he says, yet true godliness with contentment is itself great wealth. After all, we brought nothing with us when we came into the world, and we can't take anything with us when we leave it. So if we have enough food and clothing, let us be content. But people who long to be rich fall into temptation and are trapped by many foolish, harmful desires that plunge them into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, and some people, craving money, have wandered from the true faith and pierced themselves with many sorrows. So, at first glance, you would wonder, is Paul some kind of a socialist? Like he's just telling us to sort of chill and live off of other people's generosity? Is that what he's saying? No, not at all. This actually follows a whole section where Paul is warning Timothy about people who are using religion or using the religious system and other people's goodwill to get wealthy. So Paul is not at all a socialist. He's not saying that you should just live off of other people. Now, unfortunately, there are people that live that way, even in religious circles. You see some people that get really wealthy off of faith stuff, and that's not at all what the Bible teaches. But God is calling us to live a life of simplicity, to live in a way where we are continuing to move forward, but at a sustainable pace. He's calling us to continuously take steps forward, but steps in a moderate pace, not 10 or 15 steps at a time, maybe 1 or 2 steps at a time, so that we can live a healthy, balanced rhythm in our lives. And when we're not content, that's when we want to take on bigger chunks than what we actually can sustain. And that's when our stress levels go way up and it becomes damaging to our bodies. So when Jesus taught what Paul is teaching Timothy here about living in contentment, it was very countercultural then and very countercultural now. It often takes years to assimilate these concepts that Jesus taught. Our culture is so entrenched in this idea that bigger is better. You know, if a 1,200 square foot house is good, then a 2,400 square foot house is much better. And so we are constantly driving ourselves to get bigger and better. You know, and an F-150 is good, an F-250 is much better. And if you've got a 250, you really need a 350. And there's this idea that we constantly are reaching for more. And often it takes until you're in the latter part of your life for you to realize, you know what? Why am I doing this to myself? And you see people in the later years of their life downsizing. Now, we're living in a very interesting time because actually our young people, the people that are 30 and under, they are getting this better than us that are middle-aged. The 30 and under crowd, they're going, you know what, I'm just going to live in a tiny house and drive a small car, and I'm just going to be happy to live a minimalist life. And I look at them and I go, you know, you're onto something. But the truth is, for those of us in the middle years, we've still got this thing from the 80s where we're going, no, I need to have more. I need to have bigger. I need to impress somehow. And we sometimes will despise the younger and just kind of go, what's wrong with you? How come you don't have any ambition? And I go, I wonder, you guys might actually be onto something here. This is maybe, just maybe, something that Jesus was talking about. See, I actually believe that Jesus taught us to listen to our limits. I think God can actually speak to us through our limits. Now, that is not your typical, have faith for big things and dream big dreams kind of gospel. And yet, I believe that's exactly what Jesus was teaching his disciples. When he says, go out into and preach the gospel and don't worry about tomorrow. Don't take extra stuff with you. Just trust me. Live day by day. Live simply. I believe God was teaching us to live a low-stress lifestyle. And I believe this is something that we as Jesus followers actually can bring to our culture and say, hey, for those of you that are stressed out, living crazy, crazy lives, there's actually a better way to live. You don't have to live like this. Your identity doesn't have to be tied to being bigger and better and impressing. You can actually live a very happy and content life with very little. It's a beautiful thing. Now, the second thing that I just want to suggest in connection with stress is to take moments to just breathe. Everybody just take a deep breath right now. You guys are so countercultural. Our culture is go, 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 go. And yet I believe Jesus actually called us to take moments to just smell the roses. Let's turn to John chapter 15, verse 4. Now this was Jesus' closest friend who's writing what Jesus said. And he says, "So you must remain in life union with me, for I remain in life union with you. For as a branch severed from the vine will not bear fruit, so your life will be fruitless unless you live your life intimately joined to mine." See, Jesus really wants to have intimacy with us. Like I mentioned when we were doing the communion thing. He wants to have a close relationship with us. And you can't do close relationships at 90 miles an hour. You have to stop. You have to have moments where nothing else is distracting. You have to have moments where you can truly connect. And so you have to slow down and you have to feel. I think our culture really doesn't help us here. We don't feel well because we are numb at the pace we're living. So for me, slowing down actually means meditating. Now, I know that's a little bit of a scary term for some people because there's lots of different kinds of meditating. But Christian meditation is when you fill your mind with the Bible, different promises, the words of Jesus, and you do it in a prayerful way. Every day I need time to just meditate on Jesus, to focus on his love for me, to breathe. And I can't do that when I'm multitasking. I know there may be some people that can, but I can't. Like I can't do it when I'm driving my car, when I'm got the radio turned on or whatever, or when I'm, watching YouTube or whatever. I need to just put everything aside and I need to slow right down and I need to give God my undivided attention in those moments. And so I need to have times like that on a regular basis. Now it's interesting that in certain workplaces and even in certain schools, they've recognized that this is important for us to have a healthy rhythm. And they've started introducing times where people can slow down and just become more aware of what's going on the inside and what's going on around them. Now, some of those things are connected to other religions and so on, and I'm not necessarily promoting that at all. I'm just saying in my relationship with Jesus, I need moments like that, where him and I can connect without any distractions. And I believe that is one of the key factors in order to live a truly thriving life on the inside. Okay, let's take just a couple of minutes here for some Q&A if you have a question. Anybody? Okay, yeah. Yeah. So Ruth is saying that doesn't it come from Satan sometimes, that he is badgering us and pushing us? And I think actually that's very true. There's a spiritual dimension to this where he can drive up the stress level in our lives. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. So Yeah, exactly. So Melissa here is saying, doesn't stress also come from fear and doubt? So when we live in a sense of anxiety, fear and doubt about certain things, that drives up our stress level. So that's where having God's love in our hearts brings down the stress level, because faith and love counteract fear and anxiety or doubt. Absolutely. Anybody else? Yeah.
So that a lot of the younger people say, don't worry about tomorrow. But when you get into trouble, guess where they end up at? The ground is the ground.
Yep.
Because they didn't worry about tomorrow.
Right. So the question is, some of the younger people say don't worry about tomorrow, but then when they get into trouble, they come running to the people that are older that did worry about tomorrow and thus are prepared. So you're absolutely right, there's a balance in all of this. I don't think there's a sense of irresponsibility that is healthy, where it's like, you know what, just eat, drink, and be merry, and don't even worry at all about the future. I think there's a healthy sense of thinking through the consequences of what we're doing and planning for the future, but not at such a level where we're driving ourselves to achieve goals that are really way beyond our capacity. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. Yes, Bob. Mm-hmm. Yep. It can be. So the question here is, when you're trying to help somebody else, can that bring your stress level up? And it certainly can. And that's where we have to be very careful to listen to our limits. And that can be very challenging when you are helping somebody. See, Jesus said, the poor you will have with you always. So there's always going to be more needs out there than what you personally can meet. So you have to become comfortable with, this is how much I can do, and beyond that, I'm sorry, I can't help you. Somebody else will have to pick up the ball there. And this is why we are a family. We all work together to help one another. It's not one person that tries to help everybody. It's all of us together doing our part. Absolutely. Good question. One more question. Yes?
Do you think that it comes from having a conscience?
Conscience can definitely create anxiety in a sense. And we'll talk more about that in 2 weeks when we talk about relationships, because that has more to do with how you're relating to other people than your performance anxiety. But there's a sense in which the way we are treating other people can create anxiety. And it has to do with our own perception often of what right and wrong is. Because when we step into territory that we perceive as wrong, our stress levels go up, way up. Yeah, no, good question. So let's wrap this up. And this is kind of a little bit of a funny story. I may have told this before, and if you've heard it before, forgive me. But this was in the very first church I pastored in Sweden. And there was a young dad who phoned me up one morning, and he was just, talking a mile a minute, stressed right out of his mind. And he said, I got to meet with you. I just don't know what I'm going to do. And he was thinking of quitting his job, and he was worried about all kinds of different things. And so I said, yeah, come on over, let's talk. And so he came into my office, and he just started tumbling out of him all of these different things that he was just stressed right out about, and he was just climbing the walls with anxiety. And after he finally finished sort of pouring his heart out and finally took a breath, I interrupted him and I said, how have you been sleeping lately? And then he went on another, I get the baby, and I can't sleep, and they just had a brand new baby. And then after he finished about that, I just said to him, I'd love to talk to you about all of these different issues, but maybe first, why don't you just lay down on the couch here in my office? And he laid down on the couch, and I grabbed a blanket and put it over top of him, and within a few seconds, he was out cold. And he slept for about 2.5 hours. And then all of a sudden, he woke up and, what happened? What happened? I said, well, you actually just fell asleep and had a little nap. He said, how long did I sleep? I said, well, actually about 2.5 hours. He said, did you want to talk now? And he sat up on the couch and he said, actually, I feel a lot better now. I think I'm good now, actually. And sometimes we just need a moment to stop and let God just work His wonderful love into our souls. And sometimes sleep is the best way to do that. If you've been living at 100 miles an hour, God may be saying to you, take a nap. And as we come to the end of the first segment of this journey we're on this month on stress management, I just want to stop and say something to those of you that, you're kind of going, who's this Jesus guy? Like, you keep talking about him like he's a person. Like, what's that all about? He actually is a person. Now, he's not a visible person to us right now, but he is a person that's very real and walks with us every step of our life here if we embrace him and invite him. And if you've never done that, it's very easy. You just say, Jesus, I would love for you to come into my life and to walk with me and to help me, to teach me how to live a life that truly is thriving. And if you're here today and you've never done that, I think that would be a beautiful start to a whole new type of stress management in your life. So I'm going to invite the prayer team to stand right over here where they were standing before. And as the worship team wraps up here today, if you're in a position where you've never invited Jesus to come into your life, I'd like you to do just exactly like that person that balloon symbolizes did. She walked over to the prayer team and she said, tell me how to do this. And they helped her. They walked her through that process of starting a relationship with Jesus. It's a beautiful thing, I guarantee you. And if you're already a ways down that journey with Jesus, I guess there's two things that I'm encouraging all of us to do here. One of those is to learn to listen to your limits. I've been really bad at that in my life. It's only in the last 5 years or so where I've started to stop and go, can I really handle this without jeopardizing other areas of my life? Because I always thought, God wants me to push hard. And I'm realizing that's not how God is. God actually wants us to live a great life. And so he wants us to learn to live with a pace that's very sustainable. So learn to live with your limits and then practice connecting emotionally with Jesus every day. Take some time every day to just be with Jesus. Whatever that looks like for you, have a moment where it's just you and him, and you can let his love soak into your soul. Can we do that? Okay, Crystal, wrap it up. Then we'll be on our way to lunch.